Today I want to dive into Romper Stomper, a film that's as controversial as it is brutal. My interest in this flick is twofold. First, it sparked a heap of chatter in the wrestling world, particularly with AEW's Jon Moxley, whose character is a direct nod to Hando, the film's neo-Nazi protagonist. The second reason? This movie doesn't hold back on its portrayal of hate and violence, making it a tough watch that's hard to shake off. Romper Stomper kicks off with Hando, played by a young Russell Crowe, and his gang of skinheads, a crew that lives for violence and debauchery. They're a bunch of violent bastards, partying hard, breaking each other's balls, and fucking in front of each other like it's just another Tuesday. Right out of the gate, they unleash a vicious assault on a Vietnamese couple, reminiscent of the mindless brutality in A Clockwork Orange. The camera shakes, the colors are bleak, and you feel the grimy streets of Australia seep into your skin. It's raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic, just the way it should be when dealing with the ugly reality of neo-Nazi gangs. In the next act, we meet Gabe, who gets sucked into this hellhole after her mother's tragic death. She's got her own demons, believing her mother's death was a suicide tied to a twisted Lolita-like relationship with her father. As she gets involved with Hondo, the film doesn't shy away from showing their graphic, pornographic encounters. It's all part of the gritty tapestry of gang life, the camaraderie built on a foundation of hate and violence that feels as disturbingly real. The tension escalates when the Vietnamese community bands together to fight back, leading to an explosive showdown with Hondo's gang. It's a chaotic brawl, more than 70 Vietnamese taking the fight to them, and you can feel the desperation on both sides. The neo-Nazis retreat to their lair, a makeshift headquarters that feels more like a sinking ship than a sanctuary, and you can't help but sense the irony in their plight. They're violent assholes, but they're also scared and cornered. Critics often rave about films that throw despicable characters into the spotlight, believing that a great performance can redeem even the worst of them. Think of Marlon Brando in Last Tango in Paris or Dustin Hoffman in Midnight Cowboy. In Romper Stomper, you might find yourself feeling a twinge of sympathy for these skinheads, despite their hateful ideologies. They're young adults, lost and misguided, and while they revel in their violence, they're also caught in a cycle that leads to their own destruction. The film captures their collective camaraderie, a twisted brotherhood forged in hate, making you question how far empathy can stretch for such despicable characters. The story thickens as the gang finds a new hideout in a rundown garage where the owner's sexuality is hinted at, adding another layer to this gritty world. Gabe, played by Jacqueline McKenzie, is the real psychological heavyweight in this mess of a movie. She's layered, troubled, and downright fascinating. The choice to give her seizures adds a layer of vulnerability that makes the audience want to root for her, despite the chaos she's diving into. Right from the start, it's clear she's seeking an escape from her father, an abusive piece of work, sexually abusive at that, and she's ready to sell anything for a fix, whether it's her prescription pills or some illegal drugs. When she leaves home, she doesn't even pack her meds. It's a reckless move, but desperation drives her, and that's the raw heart of it. Once she falls in with Hando, things spiral. Their relationship is a train wreck waiting to happen, and Davey, the gang's wide-eyed kid, has a crush on her too. They go so far as to break a shop window just to steal a red jacket for her, a petty crime fueled by infatuation. But when the Vietnamese mob comes crashing into their hideout, Davey's loyalty shines through as he's willing to risk it all to grab her sweater. It's a twisted little love triangle wrapped in violence and desperation. As the plot thickens, Hondo finds himself strapped for cash, and Gabe hatches a plan for a home invasion at her father's mansion. When they storm the place, her father's sickening delight at seeing her is palpable. He's hoping for another round of their twisted, abusive encounters. The neo-Nazi gang invades his home, tying him to a toilet, which is a perfect metaphor for how he's a piece of shit stuck in his own filth. Gabe picks up a miniature Buddha and smashes it on her father's fingers, a symbolic act of defiance as she decides not to bash his brains out. The gang drinks all his champagne, trashes his brown car with graffiti, and when her father finally escapes, he fires a gun in desperation. Back at their new headquarters, Gabe has had enough of Hando's bullshit. She lays into him, making it clear that all they had to do was steal and not attack her father, who's now definitely going to hunt them down. Her vulnerability, compounded by her seizures, makes her realize that if her father finds her, he could force her back into his sick grasp. Back then, parents had too much power over children, especially those with mental health issues, and she's not about to go back to that hell. After her confrontation with Hondo, he retaliates violently, banning her from the gang. But Davey, ever the loyal sidekick, chooses her over Hando, and together they make a break for it. Gabe calls the cops on the gang's whereabouts, and this move is a game changer. It raises questions about her morality. Does she have a sociopathic streak for betraying them, or is she merely playing the long game for her own freedom? She's cunning, and while Hando is charismatic, Gabe's got the intelligence to cut ties and set herself up for independence. Before she leaves, Davy gives her his address, and when she shows up, they have a raw, unfiltered sexual encounter in his shed, his grandmother's house just a stone's throw away. This scene is raw and explicit, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil simmering beneath the surface. The film's climax hits hard when Hondo breaks the news that one of their gang members, a kid who looked no older than 11, got shot by the police during a raid. It's a brutal reminder of the stakes they're playing with. Hando, Davy, and Gabe are spiraling deeper into chaos. Davy's grandmother isn't having any of it, calling Gabe a whore and making it clear she's not running a brothel. Their desperation pushes them to rob a gas station, where Hando crosses a line by choking the store owner with a chain. It's a violent crescendo, leading to a beach getaway where Gabe decides to torch their getaway car, claiming it's to avoid being tracked down. It's a reckless decision, showcasing her penchant for taking things to the extreme, and it sends Hando into a violent rage. In the chaos that follows, Davy sides with Gabe, stabbing Hando in the neck as she fights for her life. The film ends with Davy and Gabe starting anew, devoid of a vehicle and more than likely using a tour bus to escape their past. Gabe's manipulative nature is on full display throughout. She knows how to work Hando's emotions to her advantage, drawing him in just long enough to deliver the final blow. If she hadn't found that weakness in him, he might have emerged unscathed from their chaotic world. Instead, her cunning redirects the course of their fates. This aspect of her character speaks to the film's larger themes of power dynamics and manipulation. It's a stark reminder that in a world filled with violence and desperation, each character is vying for control, often at the expense of others. The film ultimately presents a grim tableau of survival, where the lines between love, loyalty, and betrayal are blurred. Gabe and Davy's relationship is complicated, born from shared trauma and the raw need for connection in a world that continuously seeks to tear them apart. Their union at the end signifies a fragile hope, but it's underscored by the reality that they have no vehicle and no clear path forward. The tour bus becomes a symbol of their escape, yet also a reminder of their instability, as they leave behind a trail of violence and chaos. The climax underscores the brutal consequences of their lifestyle. Hando's descent into violence and his inability to adapt to the shifting dynamics around him lead to his downfall. The police represent an unforgiving force, a reminder that the world outside their bubble is just as dangerous, if not more so. The film paints a bleak picture of the consequences of toxic masculinity, gang culture, and the lengths to which individuals will go to assert their dominance in a crumbling social order. In conclusion, while the film's pacing and some repetitive elements might detract from its initial impact, a deeper analysis reveals a powerful commentary on the human condition. It explores themes of manipulation, survival, and the cyclical nature of violence. Gabe's journey in particular serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of falling into the same patterns of abuse and control. Ultimately, the film leaves us pondering the question of agency. In a world filled with manipulative figures, can one ever truly escape the web of control? Gabe's final acts of rebellion suggest a glimmer of hope, but they also raise the unsettling possibility that the cycle may never fully break. The characters are trapped in a brutal dance of power, where survival often means becoming the very monsters they seek to escape. While I didn't enjoy the film's early pacing, the psychological depth and complexity of the characters ultimately reveal a profound narrative about the darkness of human nature. It's a film that lingers, forcing viewers to confront the uncomfortable realities of manipulation and the struggles for power in a world where everyone is fighting their own battles. Even though I wasn't into the flick until that explosive brawl between the Vietnamese mob and the neo-Nazi gang wrapped up, I found myself digging the film for its raw, unfiltered take on gang life. It wasn't just about the violence. It was a hard-hitting lesson wrapped in chaos. Crime doesn't pay, and there's always a bigger monster lurking in the shadows. If you choose to do the right thing, you might just find someone who's got your back, someone who stands for something greater than the bullshit you're tangled in. I'd rather roll with a righteous soul than a scumbag any day of the week. Now let's talk about the critics. David Stratton of SBS's The Movie Show called the film socially irresponsible, claiming it glamorized neo-Nazism during a time when racial tensions were boiling over. He refused to slap a rating on it, while his co-host Margaret Pomeranz handed out a shiny 4.5 stars. Stratton even went so far as to say it was a Clockwork Orange without the intellect. That ruffled some feathers, especially when director Jeffrey Wright got so pissed he ended up pouring a glass of wine on Stratton at the 1994 Venice Film Festival. Stratton later clarified his stance, admitting he thought the film was expertly crafted, but feared it might incite more violence in a world already on edge. Ironically, he received letters from the Vietnamese community thanking him for his caution, believing the film might fan the flames of racial hatred. Romper Stomper was fueled by the real-life horrors of Dane Sweetman, a notorious neo-Nazi from Melbourne. Wright reached out to Sweetman while the guy was serving life for murder, but prison regulations kicked in, so they ended up corresponding instead. Sweetman sent over a transcript of his trial, which inspired some of the film's most chilling lines and characters, like Hando. The echoes of Sweetman's life are all over this film, but you won't find his name in the credits. Russell Crowe even fessed up to borrowing from Sweetman during an interview back in '92. Now, pivoting to the wrestling world, Jon Moxley's recent character is stirring up just as much controversy. In the history of wrestling, there have been plenty of gimmicks inspired by controversial figures. Raven in ECW drew from Alex in A Clockwork Orange, while Sting was a nod to Eric Draven from The Crow. And let's not forget Joe Gacy, whose name is a dark reminder of John Wayne Gacy. There's even the infamous curb stomp by Seth Rollins on Big Langston, which mirrored a scene from American History X. That raised eyebrows, especially since it aired on Martin Luther King Day. The wrestling world has its fair share of racism issues, and Moxley's portrayal, echoing Hando, could be a recipe for disaster, especially given AEW's recent reputation for shock value. It gets messier when Moxley starts quoting lines from Hitler. Sure, shows like South Park and Family Guy have played with such references, but wrestling isn't exactly the same ballpark. If Moxley wants to channel a Romper Stomper-inspired character, he better tread carefully. It's crucial for him to consider how his portrayal impacts the audience and the company, steering clear of feeding into any anti-Semitic or racist narratives. In the end, Romper Stomper is a must-watch. It strips away the glamour and shows the gritty reality of gang life, the camaraderie, the chaos, and the haunting truth that those who live by the sword often end up dying by it. Just like wrestling's dangerous dance with controversy, it's a reminder that darkness can always be eclipsed by an even greater force of darkness.